just a real humble guy, you know. So he's got to be awesome to work for. I'm just really, just very proud of you, man.
Yeah, he's a neat guy. Well, I'm sure I'll be able to get him on the show one of these days with you guys if you want.
That would be awesome.
Absolutely.
So
get his side of everything.
You know, I'll share a quick story real quick about your dad. When you were just a little guy and I connected with your dad out there at the racetrack and started working on the 64 car for him out there at Willamette Speedway. You know, your dad was just such a huge lover of life and just had so much fun in him, and racing was fun. Those days were fun with him out there at the racetrack. And I remember one of the first nights I worked for him was a 2-day weekend. And we go out and we race, and Bill did a pretty good job. You know, I think he finished 6th or 7th in the A main, and he pulls up the track, had that big smile, and hugs around for the crew. And after the races were over, he's like, "Hey, stick around, we're gonna barbecue." And I thought, all right, cool, we'll hang out. And we go out to the RV out there in the back, and I come around the corner, and your dad has got this barbecue set up. And sitting on top of the barbecue is the largest pan I have ever seen in my life. And there's about 33 gallons of beef stroganoff in this pan. And he's stirring this thing with what he called a spoon to look more like an oar for a raft, right? And he's stirring this thing, and he's having a trouble stirring this thing. It's deep. I'm not kidding you when I say we could have fed everybody at the racetrack, and he's stirring it with an oar, and I'm looking at him like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I hope you're hungry." I said, "Not that hungry," but it was awesome. And I just remember those days with your dad and working on his car and heading up to Canby and watching you speed around the property on the golf cart. And I just said, "Man, that kid is there's no fear." I mean, even on the golf cart, you knew Billy was going to be fast someday, right? It was cool.
Yeah,
it was fun. But
that's the biggest problem I'm having back here is. My dad was so outgoing, and growing up, everybody was your friend. You go to the racetrack, and those are all your buddies.
Right.
Well, you're back here now, and this is a living,
mm-hmm.
and this is how you put food on the table, and it's a whole different deal. On race days, Horn will send me a picture. I have 2 mallards. One of them just died, but I got, I had 2 mallards, 2 ducks. He'd send me a picture to the cage. He'd be like, "These are your only friends right here, bud." And you left them at home. Yeah. I'm like, all right. It's just a whole different atmosphere back here. And it's, you definitely leave everything out there is all I can say. And it's, I miss my dad for all that. He taught me a lot about, being who I am and being outgoing and being friendly to everybody no matter what, no matter where you are, no matter how far you make it, or no matter how successful you are. You just got to stay humble and be kind to everybody.
Absolutely.
Everybody you meet along the way, that's the biggest thing.
Absolutely, you're right. And I'll tell you right now, everybody misses your dad just because he was such a big presence physically and, in spirit. He was you knew where Bill was and you knew how much fun was going on. And actually, we were just joined in the studio, Billy, by a man who actually had the benefit, the fortune of working with your dad. I'm sure he's got some good stories. Steve Moore just walked into the studio, and when was the last time you talked to Steve?
I actually talked to him a couple weeks ago.
Good. Well, now we'll get you guys talking on the air, and
touch with those guys.
Maybe we, can get a story from Steve about your dad and some of the early days.
Oh, Billy's dad, he was quite the character. If you walk out the racetrack and you hear a hoo-ah, you knew things were going to be good for that night,
That's
right, Billy?
That's right.
Yeah. Bill, your dad, he used to be the tech guy for our crate series class. He'd be up there in that big scissor lift watching all of us go around the track, and I don't know who got disciplined more, all the drivers or you during that time. Bill, he was having a good time watching us race. I know that.
Yep. He did. So let's kind of, I know you've got some big plans coming up. We already talked about, the Winter Nationals in Florida. You've had some success there in the past, and you're going to be driving the Hornaday car. That is going to be one of those deals you talked about. It's kind of a once in a lifetime deal for most people, and you get to go back and do it, on a yearly basis. And what are you expecting going into the Winter Nationals?
I'm hoping. 2 years ago there's over 100 cars there, and we were 5th in points at the end of Speed Weeks my first time there, and then I was 6th. And last year I think I ended up like 16th. It's just all about being successful and being up front. Everything's about starting position like it is with anything you do. But the main thing that you're going to get out of Speed Weeks is all your sponsors are there. I'm very fortunate to have picked up a lot of sponsors along the way that really help out with my whole racing career. From everything from drive shafts, from the shock sponsors, springs, you name it. It's all this stuff helps. Little things, it all adds up. Being a kid in Oregon, you sit there and order stuff out of a catalog, and it's like a big dream. And now you have boxes that are showing up at the door. It's so awesome to be able to have such great partners that help out with this whole deal. So that's the biggest thing I push with telling these kids. If you want a chance, go back to Florida. Save your money instead of going and running in Ohio and spending $10,000 doing that. Take $10,000, rent a ride, and go down there and put everything in your heart on the line and give it one shot. That'll really tell you kind of where you're at. Because this racing deal is pretty expensive to have your parents sit there and keep dumping money into something, and it's when you can go out there and run good and get sponsors to help you out, it definitely helps everything.
Absolutely. So we've got a couple callers actually texting us on the Swears Trucking chat line wanting to know if you're going to bring a mod out to the West Coast at all this year.
Would love to see that.
Well, I've been trying to send Steve one over here, but we're trying to get these things going. Horn wants to slow down a little bit this year and really focus on our program and build it to where it's huge. Down the road, he wants to build, I think we did like 13 cars or something last year. I think he wants to plan on doing about 5 or 6 this year and focusing on us more. Mm-hmm. And I do have a car that's going to California, so hopefully I'll be able to, my old car is going out there to like the Bakersfield area.
Right.
So hopefully in my 2017 plans, a trip to Bakersfield or 2 might be in the books.
Well,
I'd really like to chalk on the old Budweiser shootout down there. I'd like to do that. Bud Nationals.
We will be down there calling that show, and we would love to see you show up with a car. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I ran that the last year my dad was alive. So it mean a lot to go down there and run that deal again. That'd be pretty fun.
Yeah, it's a great race, and the level of competition there gets tougher and tougher every year, and that is a very, very tricky racetrack. So it's one it's going to test even the best of the drivers in that area. Yeah. Test it every year. So
even if Billy is over in North Carolina, there's a little piece of Billy still out here in Oregon. I mean, whether it's him coming out to the West Coast or one of his chassis still out here on the West Coast, mm-hmm. So that will make 2 of your old chassis coming out here to the West Coast. I know you've got an old one out here already. Then you've got another one going to Bakersfield, right?
Yeah, my GRT, Campos had that Lightning, mm-hmm. and I guess he did pretty well in that thing this year.
Did very well.
Very well.
Someone told me at PRI he flipped it, so I got on the phone. I'm like, hey, bud, you need a car? What's going on out there?
Yeah.
And he loves that car so much, he's like, I'm trying to figure out if I can fix it.
He waited till the last year, or the last race of the year to flip it, but, we got on a rough track, and he caught a rut, and just one of those deals where it turned him over. He actually landed on the wheels, but, it was still
it was insane.
Style points.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He got a lot of them, no doubt about it.
Almost like Steve Moore.
Yeah, no kidding. Up on 2 wheels.
Yeah, but I finished the race after they rolled me back over.
Absolutely.
That's true. That is true.
One of the best races, the mod race of the year, was between him and Colin Weinberger. I think they changed the lead about 4 or 5 times in about 6 laps. I think that was probably one of the most exciting races I've seen in all year.
That was a good race.
That was a very good one. A lot of fans were up on their feet. So, we are really looking forward to hopefully seeing you there at the Budweiser Nationals. We'll be down there calling that race. There's a lot of fans from Oregon that travel down to that show, and we were down there this year, and we saw quite a few Oregonians down there, not just with, the race teams, but in the stands wearing the Willamette Speedway and the Sunset and Cottage Grove Speedway shirts. And it's always cool to see, our Northwest travel down there. And Steve, are you going down?
Yeah,
are you running the show?
Well, we got some plans we'll talk about a little bit later in the show, but I'd love to go back to Bakersfield. I mean, that was pretty intense racing down there. Those guys, they're serious. They're not like up here. They, you get in the way, you're going to be on the sidelines watching the race instead of being in it.
That's right. And how cool would that be for Billy to bring a car out and bang doors with you again? I mean, a lot of fans would love to see that. That'd be great.
Billy and I have banged doors a couple times. We were back in. We were back at, where was that, Billy? We knocked each other out. You knocked me out for the main event, and I come help you fix your car. We were in Arizona that day, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, American Speedway. We were fighting for the transfer spot for the main event that night, and me and Billy got together, and he ended up getting a spot. I ended up getting put out in the dirt. So his car was a little tore up after he put me out in the dirt. I went down and helped him put his car back together. That was a blast. That was, it seemed like all the guys in Oregon always seem to get together and race together no matter where we're at.
That's true. That's true. Even down at the Bud Nationals.
Yeah. See, you do that at home, and it's fun and games, and you get out and have a beer and laugh. You do that back here, and they're wanting to hit you with a crowbar.
That's when you need Casey back there. He's a little bit bigger than you are.
A little bit. No kidding.
Yeah.
So, man.
Yeah, you got to have big crew guys back here.
That's a whole different ball game, and we learned that real quick when we took the late model back. And when you go out and you're a half second off fast time and you're 51st fast out of 86 cars, you're gonna get a little shot of reality about how fast those guys really are. It's an awesome thing, and
it's pretty wild.
Yeah, we're very proud of what you're doing, and you want to rattle off some sponsors here for us.
First off, I got to thank Phil Bond Construction. He's my stepdad. And he's still there in Oregon and working his tail off to be able to help me race. If it wasn't for him, I would have probably been done a long time ago. He sends money every month to keep me racing, and I couldn't do it without him. So definitely him and Hornady Race Cars. They're behind me, and I'm proud to be part of the team. And I think Superior is one of my Oregon sponsors that does my fuel cells.
Right.
Keeping it local.
Paul Culp.
And Kaiser, Schoenfield, Tomcat. I'm a Penske house driver, so I got Penske shocks, Landrum springs. Trying to think, PFC brakes. It's honestly hard to remember all these guys without a picture. There's a lot of them.
It's an awesome thing, and again, we're so glad that you have that opportunity, and it's good to hear from you. Let's real quick, the biggest thing from racing here on the West Coast to going back there and running with those guys all the time. What's the hardest thing as a driver, especially a young driver, to get back there and adapt to?
The biggest thing is controlling your nerves. There's good nerves and there's bad nerves. Sometimes, you get yourself so worked up that you go out there and step on it, The biggest thing is not letting anybody intimidate you, You go out there, and when I came back here and I was racing my late model, and I go out there and I'm lined up next to Davenport and Bloomquist and all these guys, it's like, wow, I grew up watching these guys on TV.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit intimidating.
I bet, yeah.
But then on the other side, you got to just remember, I'm me, and I'm trying to make a name for myself without making an idiot out of myself. And it's good. We all can drive. There's tons of talent out there on the West Coast that I wish everybody had a shot like I did. And it's a great opportunity. That's what I'm trying to tell everybody that I meet and run into that's from home. Give it one shot and come back here and see what you can do. It's worth it. If nothing else, you'll have a story to tell when you're in your rocking chair.
There you go.
But the main thing is that, like I said earlier, that I will never forget is to stay humble and always remember where I'm from. There's a lot of guys that get on me that, I don't call and all this, and I'm trying my best to stay Billy Workman from Oregon, and that's
right on.
That's the main thing that my dad would want me to do. So it's definitely a busy sport. I'm at the shop every night till about 9-10 o'clock. Get up and I'm actually doing electronic cigarette juice. That's what I do during the day. I actually make all the liquids for them.
Really?
So I'm doing all that during the day, and then get off work, and I call it second shift. So I go over to the race shop every night and just do the grind.
A true racer.
It's a ton of work.
Yeah, definitely got to. It's not easy for anybody back there because there's so much competition and working a full-time job and having to work on the cars and the level of competition racing. In the summer, it's 4 or 5 nights a week at times, and you're always on the hustle, always on the grind. And I know you're kind of the spearhead for the West Coast. There's a lot of guys talking about going out there and doing exactly what you're talking about, taking the shot. And we're going to see Bryson James at the Chili Bowl, Tulsa, Oklahoma, coming up in January.